to THA Talks, for free thought and open minds.
And for freedom of speech.
Hello, I'm Paul Obitelli and welcome to another edition of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK. Our talks include news, conspiracies, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion, and much more. If you'd like to check out our full archive, just go to www.thatalks.com to listen to or to download all our free content. And if there's anyone who'd like to contact us and give us some feedback, maybe you'd like to recommend a guest for the show, you can email us info@thatalks.com. And don't forget you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and many other podcast directories out there. Hello everyone and welcome to the new decade, 2020. And here we are at THA Talks, the first show of the decade. I hope you all enjoyed your Christmas or Yuletide if you're in the pagan tradition, or if you're an atheist or whatever, you just enjoyed the festivities here in Britain and spent some time with your friends, with your family, and are feeling refreshed for the new year. I know I am, although I'm kind of a bit lethargic, a bit slow as we pick up after the break, and I'm sure you know what I mean, or most of you do. We're going to be talking with John White today about issues of the past year, and as we go into 2020, what we can expect with Brexit, with America, with a number of other things, issues we've talked about over the last few months. Obviously, we've got a lot to talk about already. Donald Trump has bombed military targets in Iran, killing Major Soleimani, quite a respected military personnel in Iran. Obviously, there's all sorts of opinions on this. I've supported Trump for a good few years now, particularly his military behaviour, if you like. I think he's been relatively peaceful compared to a lot of other American leaders we've grown to be used to. And I think he's kept it under control. I think he's done really well. But this is particularly worrying from my point of view. I don't like this. It feels a bit like back to normal service. I don't know if it's the Zionist Israel lobby that's pushing this. Obviously, concerned about the surrounding areas around them. I have no problem with protecting the border of Israel, as we should all protect our borders and national interests. But it seems there's always this pressure to attack either Syria or Iran, and it's very unhealthy. And I think this is problems. I'm going to hold off. You know, I'm not going to speak too soon. Donald Trump has had a habit of doing things like this, and then it's actually not been too bad. He's been quite tactful in the way he does things, but you have to fancy Iran are going to want to react to this, and if they react, you can only see it going one way. Are Britain going to get involved? Now Boris wants to be on the good side of Trump with the trade deal. There's a lot to ponder and think about, and I'm going to hold off before I give my view on this, although I will say from this point I'm very worried about it and disappointed, and we'll see where we go from there. Before we get John in here, I would just like to say sorry. I have been very sparse with shows. It's just a case of I've been busy. I'm doing this for nothing. I don't make money from it, and it's been a case of keeping it ticking over for the time being, because it's something I don't want to drop. I want to keep THA Talks going. So I want to confirm that. I want to update the website and freshen it up a bit and think of some new ideas. Obviously, the getting banned from Twitter, I can no longer use our Facebook page, which that's got a lot of follows on it and stuff. So that's not made things easier, because it's a bit disheartening where your audience is getting pulled away from you from social media. So that's another thing I need to look at and ways forward there. So yeah, just letting you know, sorry that I haven't been doing more content, but maybe that will be fixed in 2020. Anyway, onwards, and let's go and speak with John White. How you doing, John? Welcome to 2020.
Hello, Paul. Hello, THA. Cool, blimey, 2020. That has a strange ring, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We're there. We arrived. We survived.
It's a nice rounded number, isn't it? We're in the 20s again. Feels like we've gone on a time machine, doesn't it?
Well, we finally got out of being naughty, I suppose.
Yeah, well, we rounded off the year nicely. Obviously, there's whether you're a Remainer or a Brexiteer, we have clarity and we're going to move on. And it just feels a little bit, that sense of relief that it's just right, shut up, let's move forward. You definitely feel it, can you?
Oh, wow. I think that the whole nature of politics has been so radically transformed now by this absolutely epic victory.
Yeah.
But I am quite sure that very few people, unless they're at least 45 or older, have got any idea what a government with a majority of 80 means.
Yeah. We used to have this size of majorities back in the Maggie Thatcher, and even Tony Blair done it a few times, but it's been a bit uncommon for a while, hasn't it? So it's sort of brought us back to a time where you really have a dominant government,
Well, I mean, look, obviously, in the days of two-party politics, the first past the post system, that's when it works best.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a clear choice between two options in each constituency, and it forms a government. If there's only two parties, then the first past the post system produces what they call strong government. So obviously in the early 80s there was the SDP split from Labour, and that was the start of the three-party effect, and that's just escalated and escalated and escalated until we get to the politics of 2019, where it looked at the start of it like it was going to be a four-horse election, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
But even saying that, even though our system used to produce strong majorities, a majority this strong is out of this world. Absolutely out of this world. And as for the Labour Party, they haven't been in a position this bad since the middle of the 1930s.
Yeah.
So it's as if every bit of progress Labour made towards becoming the people's government of choice for 85 years has been erased with a razor in one night.
Well, that's it. There's a sense of, although obviously the Brexiteers, they were pushing, and the best solution was to have a big Tory majority that could push us through with Boris, who's a Brexiteer. And it's kind of like a feeling now that we've got a complete Brexit majority, but then you're kind of thinking, this is the Tories and they've got a really big majority. So you're kind of a little bit apprehensive not to get too excited, but we should at least think that Brexit is going to happen now. That's the least we can take from it.
It's impossible to stop.
Yeah.
I mean, I was rereading an article that I wrote earlier today, because occasionally I reread the stuff that I write. And it was an article I wrote just after the Euro elections last summer. And it was actually, the article was titled "Remain is Defeated." And reading it again, okay, I was slightly wrong in that it turned out with the right amount of pressure, the EU did renegotiate, which I think nobody could really have predicted at the time. But, leaving that aside, what I said about, the essence of it is that Remain's over. It was over then. It's just taken this long and the confirmation of this general election to finally deliver it. But there's an irony here, of course, Paul, which is, why did we even get that election?
Yeah, that's it. It shouldn't have got to that point. It's been an outrageously irritating 3 years.
Well,
yeah.
What I mean precisely about that is Boris Johnson tried to take us out on October the 31st.
Yeah.
Parliament very effectively blocked it with a combination of spoiling amendments, a Speaker of the House that was colluding with the European Union, and also the impact of the European Union itself. We were in a position where Boris clearly couldn't get Parliament to deliver what he was negotiating with the EU. Now, at that point, the EU stepped in. Now, why did Corbyn and the Lib Dems and the SNP, suddenly get behind having an election. And I surmise, but the real answer to that is if the EU said, if you don't have an election, then we won't give an extension. And it's very interesting to note that that extension was only agreed once the vote for the general election had passed. So, is that what really went on? Did the EU call time on Parliament's prevaricating? I mean, obviously, they would have hoped for a narrow Remain win. That maybe Lib Dems and Labour and SNP and Clyde Cymru and Green all together could lash up some sort of government of national disunity.
Yeah.
And revoke Article 50 or legislate to hold a second referendum or whatever the hell, But the EU itself clearly felt that it couldn't go on with a paralysed Parliament.
That's
because,
right.
I mean, it's very interesting when you look at these guys, Verhofstadt, I remember seeing Verhofstadt raging at Remainers, raging at them, because when they shot down Theresa May's deal, what they really did is they shot down Guy Verhofstadt's deal, because that was what he wanted, and in doing so, the May deal was a cunning plan, as far as these things go, because the idea was that it would take us out on paper, but keep us so closely aligned that that a future government would have a relatively easy time taking us back in.
Yeah.
But now we have a very different deal, which moves away from alignment with the customs union and all the rest of it, and still has the potential to produce a hard Brexit. And now it's the EU on the back foot, but really needs to complete a successful negotiation with us before this transition period is over.
Yeah.
We've seen some of them sort of slightly suggest that they think they need more time. We need more time. They always go on more time, don't we? Well, but at the same time, others are being very realistic and saying, no, we've got to do this. We've got to get this done in the negotiated time available. And so, we have a year here where we are going to thrash out our future relationship, and it will not be a relationship that will make it easy to take us back in the future. So this is as secure a win as we could get.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously going to be very interesting because we've got Donald Trump who's dying to make a trade deal with us, and I think he's probably got a little bit of a motive there to sort of stick the boot in with the EU because he's not a fan of the EU. So we've got a great position there. And that's obviously going to be very interesting because we're going to be negotiating with the USA and negotiating with the EU at the same time. So you kind of got a lot of power there, really, Boris has, hasn't he? What he can't get from the EU, he should be able to get from the US.
Boris is now a tremendously powerful Prime Minister. I mean, I would, as a Brexiteer, I would question whether we have to have a trade deal with the United States. After all, we've managed to trade very well with the United States without one.
Yeah.
And, there are also the many other opportunities to pick up amongst the former Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And it's worth stating that not a lot of people know, but when we entered the EEC, we had to cut all our trade ties with all of the Commonwealth. And in doing so, we caused serious hardship and recessions all across the developing world, especially. Countries like New Zealand had an absolutely terrible time in the 1970s because overnight, when we joined the EEC, they lost 40% of their economy.
Blimey. Didn't know that.
So, we paid a high price to get into the EU, and it's a lot lighter, actually, to get out of it. And we have these cultural connections and we have these relationships. So we do have the rest of the world to connect to. However, if we do form a successful, strong trade partnership with the United States, then it will, again, make it a much harder argument to abandon that to rejoin the European Union.
Yeah. And I mean, I think one thing I make clear with people as well is I'm no enemy of Europe. In fact, I'm being of Italian heritage as well, ethnicity. I'm very European, and I hope that this isn't going to hurt Europe. I hope that the EU are responsible and look after Germany and Italy and France and their trading interests, and don't spite them and to spite us. Because that's what these people, they're so addicted to their ideology. And I hope Europe survives this as well. I hope Italy doesn't suffer too much. I hope that France and Germany, that either they can force a reform and say we have seriously got to look at ourselves and sort this out, or more nations leave.
Well, let's look at it this way. The European Union is a political fiction, but Europe is a geographic continent.
That's it. Yeah, we've got to define the difference.
And Europe's going nowhere. Britain's going nowhere. But believe it or not, we have not moved barely a centimetre apart.
Yeah.
Apart from continental drift, whatever the rate of that is, it is not very high. So it has always been part of a Brexit argument. We're cutting ourselves off from Europe. Don't be daft.
Yeah, absolutely.
The fact is that we have a geographic market for our goods with the Northern European countries. We had that geographic market before we ever entered the European Union. In fact, those geographic markets go back hundreds of years, and we had exactly the same geographic markets in the time of Elizabeth I or Henry VIII. So it's another one of the myths of the European Union that it's done anything substantial for our trade, because it never did. Because we only ever sold the same sort of volumes to the same sort of countries we only ever used to sell to in the first place. And we still sold lower volumes to the southern European countries, which have got less geographically advantageous markets with us, because it's always going to make more sense for Italy to deal with France than it is for Italy to deal with Britain.
Yeah.
So there's a huge fugazi, but the reality is that business is business. Where there's a market, there's a way, and business people get on with running their businesses and running their lives, no matter what the politicians are up to. And as long as we don't have some god-awful war disrupting everything, there was never really going to be any meaningful change to our trade with Europe. Neither is there any meaningful change to our access to Europe. It simply means that we might have slightly different passport arrangements. I mean, it's no big deal.
Yeah, I'm sure that will pan out in the end. I mean, we've obviously was what's happened last week with Donald Trump attacking Iran military targets and killing Soleimani, I think his name is
Soleimani.
Yeah. And obviously a lot of the left wing are now basically saying that they think this is now going to be because we need the trade deal with America, we are now going to go to war with Iran and stuff. So let's talk about this a little bit. What do you think of, firstly, this incident, and what does it mean?
Iran attacked the American embassy in Baghdad. So let's start with the beginning. That's what actually happened.
And that's a provable fact, is it?
Why Donald Trump then took out a high-value military target, the man who was responsible for organising this disruption right across the Middle East. And
did they actually attack the embassy, or they were planning to? And have we got evidence that they were actually planning to, or they did?
Well, they wrote the guy's name on it and said, our leader is. And these were his Quds fighting groups. Yeah. And there's allies of him that have been pictured there, and they're supervising it all and everything else. And the real question is, let's remember, Soleimani was not killed in Iran.
Okay.
He was killed in Iraq. What was a top Iranian general doing coordinating militias from Baghdad airport?
Good question.
That's a very good question. I reckon there's a very simple answer to that. He was up to malarkey. Now, I mean, it's very interesting to look at relationships here because America has had a very different relationship with Iran in the Obama years. Yeah, Obama sent them billions and billions of dollars to bribe them not to make nuclear weapons until Israel caught them out in 2018, early 2018, I think it was, with an Iranian nuclear weapons facility making 5 nuclear warheads underneath a French cement factory in northern Syria. So, you know, it's not the case that Iran is an isolationist power which has been keeping itself to itself. That's kind of the public myth. You know, the reality is that Iran has been gaming events in the Middle East and causing instability in all of its neighbours, and that's accelerated in the last 10 years. Another point people make about this guy, Soleimani, is that, you know, they say, oh, but the Iranians were very instrumental in fighting ISIS. And we know that the Cameron-Obama governments colluded together to help ISIS so that they had a proxy force to weaken Syria. You know, so we know some games which have gone on. But since Donald Trump has become president, and of course also partly this is because the Syrians invited the Russians in, you know, but between the two, despite there being some tensions between the Russians and the Americans, they have managed to militarily defeat ISIS in Syria. But of course, that doesn't mean ISIS doesn't exist in other places. And at the same time, we've also got the Iranian-bred terrorism and instability, which is fueling this war between Yemen and Saudi Arabia, with Iranian missiles being used to fire into Saudi territory, just as the Iranians have armed groups like Hezbollah and Hamas to send rockets to Israel. So, you know, we have a situation where, you know, this guy was a key spider in the web. But it turns out that there have been that General Petraeus, do you remember General Petraeus? He spoke out within the last day, and he said that there were opportunities to take this guy out under previous administrations, meaning Obama, but it was never done. And I think this is a real key difference here, is that the president that America has now has got a very different set of priorities to the president that America had then. And I'll tell you another thing which is really interesting. A lot of these Democrats or FBI people who we now know were colluding to try to stop Trump getting elected or to get him removed from office once he was elected, we now know that a lot of them seem to have Iranian connections. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why, you know, Strzok and Page, the FBI agents who are in trouble over the insurance policy and defrauding the FISA court to get surveillance on the Trump campaign. Why is it that Peter Strzok is an Iranian father and Lisa Page is an Iranian mother?
Right. Yeah.
And you could trace these sort of connections going all the way through the Obama administration, lots of other characters. And of course, Obama himself. Why is John Kerry, former presidential candidate, wasn't he Obama's Secretary of State? I'm not sure about that. But he was over. He's been over in Iran. Pelosi and co have been over to Iran. You know, so the far left and Iran have a very cozy relationship inside the USA. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because the far left and Iran have got a very cozy relationship inside the UK. Not just the Labour Party with Jeremy Corbyn's long-standing connections as an employee of the Iranian regime, but also the SNP. Did you know that the Iranians ran fake news websites to artificially boost the social media presence of the Scottish Yes campaign in 2014? So, you know, we could see that in the clash of civilizations, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, America, Russia, China, all these powers and us, of course, we're always pursuing our mutual interests, our interests, whether they're self-interests or mutual interests. Of course, with Iran, its interests are more self than mutual because it doesn't have any friends. So, where are we now that this guy has been taken out? Well, I think that the one thing I would say is, because we have had a softness towards Iran, let's put it that way, throughout the Obama times, I believe that people have got a misapprehension about the actual power and capabilities of the United States of America. Even more so with the massive reinvestment in America's military since Trump became president. Now, a lot of people might not understand that because they go, well, America had the biggest military anyway. But under Obama, the American military was degraded to a substantial degree. And, it was effectively being weakened and systematically, dismantled. Actually, if you look at the way that it was the resources were being allocated. But now we see an America which is strong, confident, and prepared to defend itself again. And instead of playing games, because of course Hillary Clinton got money from Iran for her presidential campaign, instead of playing games, pretending to fight Iran, and for that matter, pretending to fight ISIS, now we have an America that actually will use its capabilities. As far as it goes, I believe there is a reasonable argument that a war was coming anyway. Certainly, as far as Soleimani was concerned, he interpreted Trump's desire to have less involvement in the Middle East as a green light to plan for Iran to subvert and take over Middle Eastern neighbours from within, especially Iraq and Syria, and Yemen, for that matter.
Yeah.
So, he thought he was getting away with that. I think he was allowed to make a certain bit of running, but it was always going to come to this point where, when he made his move, the Americans were going to make their move. What happens now? Well, it's really hard to say, but I don't think it's immediately increased the risk of a big Middle East war, because now Iran knows that whatever moves it wants to make are going to carry a much higher level of risk. And back to some of the actions of Iran, although Russia is considered an ally of Iran, Russia is far from impressed with the way that Iran cheated the nuke deal. And Russia is creating much stronger ties with Israel. So I don't believe that Russia would necessarily stand by Iran no matter what. And depending on what evidence was brought forward, there probably would be international support for further action against Iran. But what matters to me most about Iran is the Iranian people, Paul. And, I'm seeing, look, I'm not talking Soros regime change, right? That's not what I mean. But I am seeing a real desire for human freedom amongst the people of Iran. And frankly, they seem to be somewhat sick of their own government. And I think we could probably relate to that. And when we look at the kind of society that Iran was until the Islamic Revolution in 1979, it was aspiring to be a liberal democracy. And it had liberal values, and it had, equality, much greater levels of equality between men and women. Certainly women were allowed to be judges, teachers, to have responsible jobs, to drive and not go around in a sack all day long, Similarly, we didn't have mass executions of LGBTQ people, or even people who were simply accused of being LGBTQ is a good excuse to kill them off. In terms of Soleimani, he's definitely down for responsibility for the deaths of at least 600 American military. But in terms of what he did to the people in Iraq, this guy was a mass murderer. There's no getting away from it. That is simply the facts.
Is there? Where are these? Because this is the thing. I don't really know much about him, and I hear this. I've heard it, but we've heard that about Saddam. So I mean, where's the real? Can we go and find videos? Can we go and find some solid data of this?
You can find out what happened inside Iraq without any problems with the insurgency against Iraq and the death toll that was caused. Yes, there is clear evidence of it, Paul.
Right. I mean, the thing is for me is this. I mean, what you're saying, you make some good points, and as I've said earlier on in the introduction, that I'm sort of holding my judgment before I come down on Trump too much and whatnot. But the thing is, I can also see a future where this to fix this problem, it's not really America's fight, it's not really Europe's fight, it's in the Middle East, and there is division. Some people like this guy, some people don't like this guy, and yeah, that's a problem. But it spells war, and that's going to spell more mass immigration into Europe, more military deaths, more people hating the West and America. You're the pigs of the world. You do this, you do that. Britain, you're bombing people, and our next generation have to take that, and we're always made to be responsible for it, even though we're not really benefiting from these wars and that ourselves. Do you know what I mean? That's where I come from with that.
I completely understand your concerns. I think we all do. Yeah. And I don't, none of us want to see some god awful, absolutely terrible war that just goes on and on and on and on. Yeah. But I mean, you're right in that the solution does have to come from within the Middle East. Yeah. Which is interesting because that's clearly been a key part of Trump's diplomatic strategy in the last 2 years. Last 3 years, rather. Especially with the reforms in Saudi Arabia. Right. I mean, let's not forget. It's not that it was in I think it was about August, September 2016, but it was all coming out about Saudi Arabia's involvement in 9/11 and the repression of 9/11 papers by Obama. Do you remember that, Paul?
Yeah.
And then we had the Las Vegas shooting, which connected back to blimey, I forget his guy's name at the moment. I can see his face. The guy who invested in Twitter, the Saudi Arabian very wealthy prince Twahidi. I'm not sure about that.
I don't know that. I think I know the guy you're talking about.
But yeah, and he was fingered as responsible for Las Vegas, and then the Saudis arrested 10,000 princes and confiscated $800 billion in assets. Now, if that isn't a commitment to change, what is?
Yeah.
So we've got Saudi Arabia, we've got Israel, we've got America, and then we need to see how it's going to go with Syria and with Iraq.
So, I mean, you're coming.
You can see in the Iraqi parliament today, Iraq has got the same problem, but we did in our parliament. Meaning that the Iraqi parliament is riddled with MPs who have got loyalties to Iran. So Iraq's going to have to solve that problem internally. Same way that we had MPs whose loyalty was to Brussels.
Yeah.
So Iraq's got that problem, which might impact its stability. But then it really depends on what it might take for the Iranian people to get up there and get this government overthrown, and if that was supported by a degrading of certain Iranian military capabilities. This is another thing with Iran, and to a certain extent with Russia too, is that they do now have some pretty tasty weaponry.
Yeah, Iran, yes, and they're not a pushover, are they, Iran?
But what they don't have is the quantity.
Yeah.
Iran could maybe put together one really decent elite crack-armed military unit. And, has, 2% of the missile capability of the United States. And the Americans have got pretty good anti-missile defenses. The chances of any kind of conventional warfare from Iran impacting the United States are pretty slim. The bigger threat is sleeper cells, within America and Europe, which obviously we know exists, but then it depends on whether they are being protected or dealt with, doesn't it? I mean, I just mentioned 9/11, we know, looking back even into the history of 9/11, we know that collusion inside the United States system protected those hijackers, whether they hijacked the plane or not, ultimately, whether they were just patsies. They protected that plot, So how many potential terror cells have been protected inside the United States? That's maybe something that we're going to find out. If there is some kind of serious domestic incident inside the United States, we may well see some kind of state of emergency measures. Because one thing I'm sure of is that this administration is not messing about. And you know what? Here's an interesting tidbit that hit the news just before New Year. Here in Britain, treason is back on the menu. Have you heard this?
No.
That the treason laws are being brought back in. And also that we've got new laws which will make it illegal to collude with foreign power to influence our democracy.
Well, that sounds promising.
It does, doesn't it? Because we need that. But I mean, what I was just telling you about Scotland and the SNP.
Yeah.
And so we have this general alliance, as I'm sure you're very well aware, between the sort of far left communist ideologies and the extremist Islamist ideologies. They're natural friends. They both hate freedom and want to oppress it. But I think we may see some revelations which will shock us about people like Jeremy Corbyn and maybe people like Nicola Sturgeon as well, and I wouldn't rule out the possibility that Mr. Corbyn could face criminal charges.
All right. Well,
one of the things that he could face criminal charges for is the leaks from the leaks of the documents that he made use of during the election campaign.
Yeah.
Because Reddit, believe it or not, banned over 65 accounts that linked Labour to Russia, and they claimed that they have evidence that shows that those leaks came from Russian hacking. So it's like the Democrats in the USA, isn't it? They'll go, oh yeah, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, but they're the ones who colluded with Russia. Yeah. It was Hillary Clinton with the Iranian One deal, getting money for her Clinton Foundation, and so forth. So I think we may find a similar situation here. And in fact, it was a talking point during the election with Boris Johnson and the Russia report, wasn't it?
Yeah. No,
why hasn't he released this Russia report?
There's certainly going to be lots to look at as this year unfolds all round. It started with an explosion, literally. It's certainly we're going to have lots to talk about over the coming weeks and months, I'm sure, and I'm sure you'll be here talking to us.
But I can't crystal ball it for us, Paul. We're all having to wait to see how this.
That's right. I mean, but just to touch on some other, perhaps, I mean, it's I wouldn't maybe not lighter subject, but something that's a little less war-like, and that is, well, let's look at Hollywood again, and because we've obviously last year we spoke a lot about the Doctor Who stuff and generally Hollywood in general on how it's infiltrating Star Wars and all these things. This cultural Marxist, ultra feminist, ultra anti-white male, this kind of stuff. How are things? Because as I understand it, the new Doctor Who has taken off is it episode 12, season 12?
It's series 12.
Series 12.
The second episode is just transmitted tonight. Look, I've got good news, Paul. We're winning bigly.
That's what I like to hear.
We're winning bigly. It was a terrible year for the SJWs last year.
Well, I mean, Star Wars. You go on YouTube and you type in Star Wars. Every single review is just slating it, and it just seems the same old story that they haven't really cared about the story. All the political, bits and pieces they've thrown in there into your face. That's still there. And it's ultimately, I think the audience has turned around and says you're ignoring us. You're basically you're not entertaining us. You're just trying to brainwash us, and we know it, and we don't like it. And you've just ruined potentially 3 films that could have been fantastic.
Worse than that, doesn't it? Because it's not even that. It's you have an agenda, a purposeful agenda targeting us, our families, and our values. That's what we're really talking about, isn't it?
And they're so arrogant, they think it's not a case of that it's not what we want. It's we don't understand what we want. We should like it. We should like that Star in because we're just bigots, and that's why we don't like it. But we're meant to be the audience. They're meant to be entertaining us, and we're not entertained. Great effects, great to hear the Star Wars tune again, and to see Luke Skywalker and all that. And apart from that, no thanks. It's of course Doctor Who. It's not doing too well in America now, is it?
Doctor Who is doing terribly in America. It dropped 42% for the New Year showing from the previous year. Yeah. Of course, the Doctor Who production's in such a mess, they couldn't get their act together to make any episodes to show last year. So we've had time out. They're trying to get the audience back. But so far there is zero sign of any success. And there won't be, unless that showrunner goes, and I think unless somebody else is playing the Doctor, I don't think anyone who's left Doctor Who used to watch Doctor Who is going to come back to watch Doctor Who until that's changed.
Yeah.
So, in terms of domestically, the New Year special was a disaster, achieving only 4.8 million on its broadcast viewing. Which is the lowest episode since this version of the Doctor came back, and before that you had a 10th series of the show. The last show with Peter Capaldi was not promoted and was sort of graveyarded in the middle of the summer, and also the new series 11, series 12. Calculate their ratings in a different way that boosts the numbers, and even then they're doing no better. So it very much looks like changing the Doctor. Everything I've tried to do, it's been totally rejected by the audience.
Yeah,
and let's remember that back in the David Tennant days, Doctor Who, I think the highest it ever achieved was about 13 million. So that's 8 million people don't bother to watch the show now. And it's entertainment. It's a kid's show, and I get that because I understand why people say these things don't matter, but they do matter because
I think they do. I think it's cultural
of the overall strategy to the culture war for the shape of society.
No, I would disagree when people say oh, it's just a show, get over it, grow up. No, I mean, we grow up. This is a part of our culture, and it's not just in Hollywood. It's everywhere. It's in our education. It's in Hollywood. It's in sports. Everywhere you go, this is rammed down your throat, and it is very influential. Young kids watch a lot of television, and they're taking a lot of this in. So I would say to anyone listening, if you think this is just grown, men that just need to grow up and not take it so seriously, no, this is very serious. Star Wars, someone like that, had massive impact on all the people in my generation. People like Han Solo was a role model, an alpha male role model that a lot of kids thought was so cool. I just want to be like Han Solo and all that. Now we're seeing that change. It's what we influence out there and what people are force-fed is massively important, and it's not just about
It was a whole new worldwide awareness, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was a new way that people came together around a new mythology with a new set of with a set of values.
Yeah.
I remember 1983. I would have been 11 years old. I remember watching Return of the Jedi. When it was on in the cinema, and I was kind of confused as a kid, about where all this love stuff came from. How ultimately it was love that conquered the Sith. The love for a son that wouldn't give up on his father. So the power of these public mythologies is very important. And I have to admit, I didn't watch Rise of Skywalker. Disney can whistle for my tenor, but I did watch Last Jedi. And when I saw that, I'm not watching any more of this. But the whole of a Disney sequel has effectively become a dead canon. In that there's simply no need for it.
Yeah.
It didn't go anywhere. It didn't achieve anything. All it did was deconstruct the past, and for no good reason. So, a lot of lessons were learned by that. But I think another thing which was a really major defeat for the SJWs last year was Joker.
Oh, yeah.
Because they went all out to kill that film. They had their friends in the media, who of course share the same ideologies, who were out there about how dangerous it was and how they're going to inspire mass shootings and all the rest of it. How that code word, I don't know if you always look out for this code word. Whenever anyone says that anything cultural is problematic for who? That's always a right question when you hear that word, because Joker was problematic, because Joker basically represented a view of the world but did not need SJWs. And that's why they hate it so much. Same as they hated Alita Battle Angel. It was a movie with a strong female protagonist which did not need SJW victim culture and identity segregation.
Well, yeah, and ultimately it was a guy with a bad mother who was too screwed in the head to go out and get laid and get a girlfriend, and you ended up sympathising and liking him as the movie went on. That's their worst nightmare. You know what I mean? Joker's
a very interesting film because it's what I call a dark mirror.
Yeah.
Meaning people see their own shadow reflected in it.
Absolutely. I've spoken to a lot of people who say something haunting about it, and it is. You leave it feeling haunted. It's a truth that sort of lingers with you after you've watched it.
Well, people who were left wing thought it was a left wing film. People who were right wing thought it was a right wing film. But it's really about the flip side of our own psychology. So, it was a masterpiece. There is no disputing that. But it was also, and this is even more significant, both the cheapest and the most profitable superhero film ever.
Yeah.
Certainly in the modern era, since the start of the MCU, obviously Warner Brothers, DC had the success of what was it, The Dark Knight Rises with Heath Ledger when he was the Joker, and so that was a phenomenal, successful film. But Joker steamed past that.
I think the thing is as well, when you get these SJWs that don't like these films, a lot of it is because it's not just what the film's portraying. Is if the film doesn't toe the SJW line, even if it's a great film and fluffy and fun and great, if it doesn't toe the line, they will not like it. It will be negative, just for the fact that you're not going along with this cultural Marxist thing. Any film like that is going to be attacked with them, just regardless of the nature of the film. If it doesn't toe the line, it will be attacked,
This is something that the SJWs don't understand, which is that they are fundamentally undermining themselves.
Yeah.
Because the more they act like SJWs, the more they make it clear that anyone who's head up with SJWs, this is something to watch, this is something to support, So they literally are undermining themselves. It's also very interesting. It's not just fandom, it's wider than that as well, but the use of isms. Now, look, we've been through Brexit, words racist, sexist, fascist, oh God, they mean nothing anymore.
Yeah, misogynist.
Nothing, if somebody says, "Oh, you must be a racist for supporting Brexit," it's lost all of its power.
Yeah.
Nobody's interested anymore, and they've kind of stopped saying it. But the new word is transphobe. That's the new word, and I predict quite confidently a major cultural backlash this year. Because people are sick of these people telling people how they can think, what they must not think, how they must not be, how they must feel about themselves if they don't sit in complete cult-like lockstep with every absurdity that an SJW comes up with.
A lot of infighting as well.
But it's also interesting to see the people who are throwing that word around, some of them mean it, the majority do not. It's simply a convenient means of attack now. And, since Labour's election defeat, we have seen J.K. Rowling attacked as a transphobe. And now we're seeing Jess Phillips, who is obviously the Labour MP, who is one of the contenders for Labour leadership, is now being attacked as a transphobe. And the reason is that both of them support the idea that women should be safe in their safe spaces and have a right not to have penises in their changing areas. See, that is currently a transphobic thing to say. But I think the reality is that is a point of view held by the vast majority of women in this country, or any country,
of course, yeah,
and their husbands.
Yeah.
And isn't it interesting how badly the Liberal Democrats did when they basically declared themselves a party of pansexuality in the election campaign?
Yeah, it's a minority, and even, people that are trans, genuinely trans, they don't relate to a lot of these groups because they don't feel they're a part of it. They feel they do have an identity. Their identity has taken a shift for some reason, whatever reason we may find out one day why it is, or whatever reason. They feel they have to change their identity. So therefore they're respecting identity. They're just saying they have an issue where they have to alter theirs until they feel correct. It's not about there being no such thing as any identity. And that's the difference, isn't it?
You can't take any group of people based around a gender or sexual or race identity and say all those people are the same, because it's never true.
That's it. Yeah.
There's a big range of opinion inside the gay community, the trans community, whatever's going on, So, I mean, that partly is all part of the group think, isn't it? Yeah. You must sit in your box and you may not think yourself out of your box.
And I'll only support the LGBT movement when it starts opposing this chemical stopping of puberty, and this forcing education on young children. We don't need it. When they're old enough to ask questions, they can ask questions, and we can teach them. Leave it more to the parents. Let them dictate it more. Unless they start doing that, they don't get my support. I'm not saying none of them do, but
in fact, in terms of science fiction fandom, and this comes back to Doctor Who, I think we might have talked about how one of the writers, who is a gay man, was driven out of the show by being accused of being transphobic.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a weapon of cultural warfare, but it's about they've broken all the others,
and it's got the power. It's got the power as well. That's the thing. It's got all the power.
And they'll break this one too. They will break this one too.
Yeah.
So we're going to see, we're going to see sort of the last gasps of his ideology, and it's all part of the defeat of left-wing thinking, And but when it comes to Jess Phillips, and when it comes to J.K. Rowling, the real motive for attacking them as transphobic has got nothing to do with any real concern for trans people. What it's really about is revenge for their opinions about Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
Because look, it's like this. Oh, well, we don't like what Jo Rowling said about Corbyn, but she's putting a lot of money into the Remain campaign, la 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 la, yeah. But when they lose, that's when the scores get settled. And that's also why we're going to see the left in Britain, at least, collapse into a really horrible civil war.
Yeah.
Which is just going to go on and on and on and on and on. And there's only two possible outcomes. Either Labour does what Tony Blair did in 1994 and it purges the far left, or Labour will split. And I say that whoever becomes Labour leader doesn't matter, because they will fail. They will fail with the challenge now of uniting their own party. And it's only with that failure that then reality will start to really sink in with the left, and they will start to understand the job that's in front of them to regain a single lost voter. And one of the things which is going to have to go is this attitude that there is a Labour voter and a Tory voter. There used to be. It used to be that way. It used to be tribal. It used to be familial, but not anymore.
Now it's the British tribe that's beginning to wake up. You know, people are beginning to be patriotic and stick up for their nation and become to be nationalists. And I think that's surpassed left or right. It's people are becoming nationalists.
What was Long Bailey trying to sell? The idea of progressive patriotism.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that. Yeah. Sounds good.
There's no such thing, really.
Basically recognising that we better get more patriotic and less globalistic if we want to have a chance in hell. So look, they've got a long, long road ahead. Yeah. I mean, what have we seen just over this last weekend? We had Jeremy Corbyn stamp his foot, and demand that Parliament reopen for the debate. Well, crickets.
Yeah.
Crickets.
Well,
because
I mean,
that's what it means when you're 80 down on any vote that takes place.
Yeah.
Now, look, when the difference was a majority of 10 or something, then you've only got to get a few rebels and the government's in danger of losing a vote, but those days are gone. Those days are gone. And I can't think that there is a single issue in which Labour could get, Labour could overcome a majority of 80 for any vote on anything in the House of Commons for the next 5 years.
Yeah. Well, we've certainly got it's edge of your seat stuff, I think, at the moment as we've entered the new decade. We are about at that time when we're running out of time. Have you got anything else you'd like to let our listeners know about before we wrap it up?
My message to all Brexiteers, all patriots, is to understand that we have won the most tremendous victory. But now that we have won that victory, we need to change. Because we are no longer in the environment where we are an outside group trying to shift a compromised moribund centre. We have retaken conservatism. We have retaken the Conservative Party. Yeah, but now we need to keep our victory, and that doesn't mean that we want to have lots of small parties agitating the government with threats like, if you don't do what we want, people vote for us. That game's over. And I think the Brexit Party collapse, which in some ways was strategic brilliance, but also illustrates that, whereas that was effective in the past, that's no longer the appropriate strategy. And what that means is that we need to actually start to engage with this government positively. So that if you take an issue to campaign on, maybe it's HS2, maybe it's foreign aid, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Whatever the issue, whatever the campaign, we need to form relationship with the ministers involved, relationships with MPs who will give that support. We need to network into the Conservative Party. Now, I'm not saying infiltrate the Conservative Party. That's not what I mean. But I am saying that if someone's not all of us are going to be able to join the Conservative Party because of certain things we may have done in the past or certain parties we may have been part of in the past and so on. And maybe we don't want to. But we do need people to join the Conservative Party because we need to be sure that there are strong patriots in the Conservative Party who, if there ever is a need to elect a new Conservative leader, will be able to influence who that leader is. And also take part in whatever internal democracy may be occurring within the Conservative Party to consult on potential policies. So we need to, especially over the next 5 years, we need to change our focus to become, in a way, respectable. But by which I mean, campaigners who have real connections into the corridors of power, who are really connecting to the real decision makers and making things happen. And that's going to be the nature of our campaigning now that we are in a situation where we have an 80 majority government. And there is a danger in that the opposition is so crap.
Yeah.
Can't help it. They're really broken. They really are so broken. But it means that they're not doing their jobs because we don't have effective opposition in the House. So it means that we, the people, need to do more to hold the government to account, to hold it on course, but to do it in a positive way. Because there isn't an effective opposition in Parliament, and they're basically going to be an absolute shower for years.
Right. Well, that is just about what we've got time for. Thanks for coming on again, John. And I'm sure, to be honest,
it goes so quick, Paul.
I know it's
yeah. We'll have to do a 10-hour podcast one day.
Yeah.
Eh?
Well, I think I'm definitely going to try and step it up this year. I mean, to be honest, it's going to be difficult not to because there's so much stuff going on. And so much things to cover, so much things unfolding all over. You know, it doesn't let up, does it? You know, I'd be delighted to have you on through the year as we have been. You know, I've got some very interesting guests lined up. Really, I need to crack on with it and call them up and get going.
So I'll finish up with a reminder to come find me, John the White 1 on Twitter, as long as I can stay on there, which is debatable. But also Aslan's Army. MeWe, because we are open, you know, our doors are open and we're there for everybody. So, you know, if you want to find me, that's where you will find me. And once again, it's just a real pleasure, Paul, and lots of love and good vibes to everybody, because this is the 20s now. This is the decade that we fought for. So now we have to look after our victory.
Brilliant. Okay then, till the next time, John. Speak to you soon, and everyone out there, thank you for listening. Have a great 2020, and let's strap in. I think we're gonna need to. Take care. Bye.